What's up, everyone? I'm 26 years old and I make amateur documentaries. And yeah, this whole JFK assassination happened long before I was born, decades. But when I stood here right in Dealey Plaza, being from Dallas, I knew this story wasn't over. We've all heard the basics. Oswald, lone gunman, end of story. But if you spend more than 5 minutes looking into it, you start asking questions, like, why was Oswald silenced on live TV? Why were the files hidden for decades? And who is James Files, the guy who actually says he pulled the trigger on the grassy knoll? Trump declassified the files, RFK Jr. says we've been lied to, and Oliver Stone's still out here bringing the receipts. So I decided, screw it, let's make a film that actually goes into it all. No media filter, no sugarcoating, just real evidence and real names. This isn't some crazy conspiracy theory, and this isn't some boring history documentary. This is the real-life crime story that changed the world. So let's solve Kennedy.
As a first step toward restoring transparency and accountability to government, we will also reverse the overclassification of government documents, and in the coming days, we are going to make public remaining records relating to the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, his brother Robert Kennedy, as well as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and other topics of great public interest. It's all going to be released, Uncle Sam.
Solving Kennedy. For over 60 years, they said it was a mystery. A lone gunman, a magic bullet, a neatly packaged lie, sealed with a state funeral. But time is a weapon. And in 2025, the truth began to surface. President Donald J. Trump cracked open the final vault. RFK Jr. publicly bashed the CIA.
The Warren Commission was run by Allen Dulles, who was the head of the CIA, who my uncle fired. Congress found that, it was a plot. It was a conspiracy. There were multiple people involved.
RFK Jr. adding there is overwhelming evidence that the CIA was involved in his murder. I think it's beyond a reasonable doubt at this point.
And Oliver Stone returned to Capitol Hill, armed not with a script, but with evidence.
Nothing of importance has been revealed by the CIA in all these years, although we know from other records that there's a illegal criminal activities in every facet of our foreign policy in practically every country on earth. Mr. D. Eugenio and I saw a film of a potential Oswald watching the motorcade go by, which means that he was downstairs at the time of the shooting, and that would be very interesting to see. We couldn't say for sure that was Oswald, but it's a man who looks like him. So I think it would be a very good idea for the task force to subpoena NBC, which has the original film.
Yes, they supposedly have the original. Yeah.
They have the original film. They've refused it twice to be shown.
Yes.
And if this task force could easily get that, and the American public should have a right to judge for itself who was standing there.
Over 60 years ago, there were no cameras on every corner, no whistleblowers with an internet connection, no global platform for ordinary citizens to challenge the final story. But now we have YouTube, and for the first time, we're not just watching history, we're investigating it. This isn't just a film, this is a reckoning. Fueled by declassified CIA memos, leaked audio from LBJ's White House, and the only living man to ever claim responsibility, James E. Files. This is not a theory, this is the confession. This is the cover-up, the crime, the machine behind the myth. This is how we solve Kennedy. Part 1, Origin of a Shooter. They say assassins are made, not born. And in the case of James Files, they were right. Before the assassination, before the grassy knoll, before the bite-marked casing left in the dirt, there was Camp Hero. James Earl Files was not raised in a classroom, he was raised in their program. By the early 1950s, whispers of a covert youth program, a super soldier initiative, had begun. Tucked beneath the surface of Camp Hero, it trained children with no formal education, only obedience. A supposed 123 super soldier bred boys born during the turbulent times of the early 1940s. Camp Hero, an abandoned military installation in Montauk, Long Island, had hidden tunnels, psychological conditioning, and weapons training for children. Today, it's the stuff of conspiracy legends, the foundation for Montauk Project theories, linked to MK Ultra, time travel experiments, mind control, and even the television show Stranger Things. But for Files, it wasn't fiction.
You talked about our government looking to breed the perfect soldier. There's 123 boys they put in the Navy birthing program.
Right. Mobile, Alabama.
And did they inseminate your mother? Or
Yeah, they inseminated her, yeah.
And we don't know who the father is.
No. They put them in a milkshake, they put a bunch of DNA in the milkshake and the test tube and shook it up and
Okay, was it your mother's egg or was it a different egg?
That's what I want to know, too.
I don't know.
Okay.
My mother's dead.
So you're saying in what year were you born, sir?
42.
42.
January.
It was in 41.
So it wasn't just the Germans that were interested in a superior race. America was trying to...
We was down on the Germans for trying to create the perfect Nazi soldier. And the United States was doing the same thing the Germans was doing.
So how does this is the book. I have it on a Kindle. But how did you come to know there was 123 men like you?
Well, when I got to class, there's 123 of us were enrolled at Camp Hero there in the one class.
Okay. So you never...
It was graduated.
Some of the people that question your story,
Yeah.
One of the things they say is that the man's 17, what's he doing to allow us? That's a special forces. And because you've been being trained to be a warrior.
Since he was 8 years old. His mom started putting him on the Greyhound bus from Melrose Park all the way over to Long Island. And he would go by himself and be there for months on end.
This was during World War II when Camp Hero became a top-secret military base. German U-boats threatened the East Coast, and Montauk was considered a likely invasion point.
Part of what they call the East Coast Defense Shield, basically keeping an eye on things and making sure that there were no surprises. Two huge batteries, they're about 600 feet long, and each of those two batteries contain 2 cannons.
And yes, it's true, there are several tunnels underneath Camp Hero. Their purpose was to connect the batteries to each other.
So in the event there was any kind of an attack going on, they could communicate and go between these installations safely underground. They did fire the guns off now and then just for practice. The shock waves went all the way back to town, which is about 6 miles. There's some reports that say windows cracked.
Along with the hidden cannons, the U.S. military had another trick up their sleeve.
We're now in what is called downtown Camp Hero. It's a cluster of buildings that during World War II were disguised to look like a New England fishing village from the air. So if enemy aircraft were to come over, the guns would come up and they would just blast them right out of the sky.
When World War II ended, Camp Hero continued to be a strategic military location.
And that's Camp Hero. That's where you were trained as a young man.
8 years old, knew how to kill.
Training at 8.
And that's where you started to learn about everything from explosives, ballistics. There's, I'm sure, a lot of physical.
By the time I was 10 years old, I could throw a knife 30 to 40 feet and hit a target of a man in the kill zone every time.
And then
10.
And then when did they introduce like guns and whatnot to you?
Well, I learned the guns at the same time as learning to throw a knife.
Yeah. And to your knowledge, you're the only 123 boys still alive.
In 14 of us graduated.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Now of the 14, I'm the only one that's alive that I know of.
Okay. And so they basically washed out and they went back to normal civilian life.
No, we don't know where they went. They just disappeared.
They disappeared. Okay.
They disappeared. I think they was used at the Brookhaven laboratories.
They said it was training, but it was programming. James Files didn't become an assassin in Dallas. He was built for it his entire life. First at Camp Hero, then parachuting with the 82nd Airborne, then running guns and black ops across Southeast Asia. For 28 years, Files served as a covert asset, working in the shadow world between organized crime and government-sanctioned hits. He answered to no flag, only orders. And one day, those orders came from Chicago. By age 17, he was jumping in the 82nd Airborne Division, and by 21, he was an asset.
I changed my name for a particular reason because I had been working with a radical Cuban group, and, excuse me, what we wanted to do at that time was to protect my identity so they wouldn't know who I really was when I got married because of my family life. I didn't want anyone to retaliate on the things that we were doing. And so I took on a different identity that was authorized to me through a government agency.
Were you ever in the armed services?
I was in the 82nd Airborne. I went in 1959, state of entry, January. And in July 10th of 1959, I believe it was July 10th, we shipped out to Laos. I was 82nd Airborne.
What were some of your duties?
My duties at that time, we were working a special operations group to work with the Laotian Army in Laos at that time. And I was there strictly as an advisor on training with small automatic weapons, setting detonators, explosives, mechanical ambushes. And there was just a handful of Americans there working with the Laotian militia at that time.
How long did you serve there?
I was there through approximately 14 months. I was in Laos before I came home.
You mentioned to me one time that you were in jeopardy of being court-martialed. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
I really don't wish to elaborate on that part of the court-martial. It had to do in the field, but not of cowardice. It was something that I did that the whole face of the Laotian Army.
No problem. Could you tell me about how you first became involved in organized crime activities?
Well, I first became, it's a strange way to start out, but I was racing stock cars and driving at a local track, and Mr. Nicoletti had taken the shine to my driving, and he'd watched me on several occasions, and he had asked me once if I would like to drive for him one evening, and I took him out and test drove his car that we just picked up, a brand new Ford, and he was pretty well pleased with my driving, and from then on I became more like an assigned driver to him, and I did several drivings for him on different jobs that he did. An up-and-coming figure with organized crime, and he was known as one of the local hitmen. And as far as I'm concerned, he was the best there ever was, as far as I'm concerned.
What mafia family did he work for?
He was out of the Chicago family.
Who would have been the boss of the Chicago family?
At that time, Tony Accardo.
That's before Giancana or after Giancana?
Tony Accardo headed it up, and then Giancana came after that. Giancana at that time was one of the underlings. I guess you might say he was one of the top lieutenants at that point. Things were handed out in different branches in organized crimes, such as someone might handle the liquor license, someone would handle the loan sharking and the booking, and someone else would handle contracts for murder for hire, anything like that.
Files ran with the worst of them all: Chicago outfit hitters, CIA case officers, and Black Ops ghosts. This wasn't fantasy, this was infrastructure.
The first time that I knew about anything being planned on Kennedy, I'd heard a lot of rumors that nobody liked Kennedy, they wanted to kill Kennedy, they wanted to assassinate him, they wanted to do everything to the man.
Were you kind of upset with him yourself over the Bay of
Pigs? Oh, I was upset with him over the Bay of Pigs, but I never paid any attention to any of this at first because, you know, everybody talks. Somebody gets mad at somebody right away, and I'm going to take this guy out, I'm going to take that person out, woo, 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 you know, a lot of barking, junkyard dogs barking, you know. But I was sitting in the Harlow Grill that evening playing the pinball machine, not the flipper kind, the kind with numbers where you gamble on and you put about $10 in to play a game. And Charles Nicoletti walked in, a man that I did a lot of work with, a man that I respected. And he walked in the back room where I was at, says, "Jimmy, let's go." I said, "I'll be with you in a minute." He reached over and tilted the machine and said, "Let's go now." My reply was, "Yes, sir, Mr. Nicoletti." I knew he wasn't in no mood to wait and hang around. He said, "I want to talk to you." I went out, I got in this car, and we went for a ride. And we made it a basic habit not to sit around restaurants, talk, reels, discuss anything like that, because when other people hearing. And we went for a ride, and he told me, he says, "We're going to do a friend of yours." And I said, "Jesus, what the hell did he do now?" But I thought this was referring to one of my friends in town there. He had been robbing the pinball machines and the cigarette machines, and he had a $1,000 a day heroin habit. And he was an all-out-and-out junkie, and, you know, they'd beat him up several times and everything else and threatened him, but so far they'd never went as far as to kill him. Chuck laughed at me, and he says, "No," he says, "not him." He says, "I'm talking about President Kennedy, JFK." And I looked at him and I said, "What?" He says, "JFK." He says, "Your buddy." I said, "Well, he just busting, you know, giving me a hard time when he knew JFK. He knew how much I disliked the man." As I looked at him and I laughed. I said, "Okay, fine with me. You get in arguments there." And at this point, I still kind of thought, you know, he was just joking with me. But then he got real serious about it. So then we started talking, and he told me, he says, "What I'm going to want you to do," he says, "I'm going to look around." He says, "We'll search the area around the town here." He says, "You know everything pretty good." He says, "And see where we're going to do it at, what kind of weapons we're going to need, and other things like that, he says. And he mentioned, he said he was going to bring Johnny Roselli in on it. Fine with me, and I don't care who we work with. You know, I like Johnny. I had no problems with him. And originally we'd planned to do it in the Chicago area, but certain people didn't like that idea. So then we put it off, and this is like 6 months before the assassination ever really took place.
But you were not supposed to be a shooter?
Oh, no, never. I was not a shooter. I was, let's put it this way. I would like, you know, the gopher. I'd go for this, go for that, pick this up, pick that up, run around, drive him around. When Chuck went somewhere, I was always with him. And
did you ever get wind that the Secret Service might have found out about the plot in Chicago?
No, I didn't get no wind on that at all, no drift. I just knew that certain people high up in organized crime, they wasn't too happy about the idea of having something like that happen to that magnitude in their backyard.
Gotcha.
Because they figured Bobby would really be down there, you know. They already had their own little private wars going. And so we decided, well, we'll take it moving. So I had no idea it was going to Texas at that point. This come to me down the road.
About when was that?
Well, that day, I'm going to say probably, 2.5, 3 months maybe before I ever made the trip to Texas that they were talking about it. Because they didn't know where he was going to go. They were looking for an area to go.
Chicago was the chosen kill zone. The freeway, the angle, the exit, all ready. But then, the call came down from the top. Tony Accardo, the outfit's boss of bosses, shut it all down with 5 words. Not in our backyard. No names, no slips, and FBI bugs were everywhere, even there. So they spoke in code and left with clarity. Files was ready. He'd been training since he was 8. Nicoletti, he still needed practice. But as time passed, there was no word from Sam. The job seemed cold. Then, the CIA came knocking again. The Chicago job was iced. Accardo shut it down. Giancana stood by. But one man wasn't finished. David Atlee Phillips. Files wasn't just a mob enforcer. He was also on the company's clock. And when the phone rang, the orders came in code. Now let's dive a little bit deeper into the men that helped kill Kennedy. Most information in books or on the internet about Lee Harvey Oswald and the JFK assassination is incorrect. Some of the factual details about his life are true, such as where he was born and selected parts of his life history, but very few sources on Lee Oswald included his involvement with U.S. intelligence agencies and his covert work done domestically and abroad. Both Lee Oswald and James Files had the same CIA controller, David Atlee Phillips. Lee Oswald did not fire a shot at President Kennedy. Lee Harvey Oswald also did not kill Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit. As far as being totally innocent of any conspiratorial involvement, he was showing James Files around Dallas several days prior to the assassination, and he was instructed to do so by CIA controller Phillips, and was just following orders. Oswald's comment when asked if he killed the president while in custody of the Dallas police, "I'm just a patsy," is very true. On Sunday, November 24th, detectives were escorting Oswald through the basement of Dallas Police headquarters toward an armored car that was to take him from the city jail to the nearby county jail. At 11:21 a.m., Dallas nightclub operator and Chicago mob associate Jacob Rubenstein, or Jack Ruby, approached Oswald from the side of the crowd and shot him once in the abdomen at close range. An unconscious Oswald was taken by ambulance to Parkland Memorial Hospital. Oswald died at 1:07 p.m. Oswald's body was buried on November 25th in Shannon Rose Hill Memorial Burial Park in Fort Worth. The original tombstone, which gave Oswald's full name as well as birth and death dates, was stolen. Officials replaced it with a marker simply inscribed Oswald. George Kalura, a.k.a. Wolfman, was a good friend and associate from Melrose Park, Illinois, who was an expert gunsmith. He had a gun workshop in his home basement, and he did custom work for the Chicago outfit. I met him at the Harlow Grill in either June or July 1961. The first time I encountered Wolfman, I bought some fireworks from him. Dempsey, owner of the Harlow Grill, saw us talking and said, "I see you two have met." Kalura was wearing camouflage, and I asked if he'd been hunting. He said, "No, I brought them from home, from the corpse." I said, "So you're a jarhead." "I'm ex-Army." Wolfman and I hit it off as friends. He was a few years older than me, and served as a Marine on Operation Blue Light in Beirut. Over the years, when I was home from my adventures, we both enjoyed going to the range and shooting together. We both shot Colt 1911 45 handguns with a light trigger pull. We would collect the spent brass, and Wolfman would use them for reloading. When I needed anything regarding a handgun, shotgun, or rifle, Wolfman was an expert and could do custom modifications on any type of weapon. Wolfman, and yes, I gave him that nickname, sort of reminded me of Lon Chaney, the old Wolfman of the 1940s and 50s. George Corolla and I would remain friends for many years, right up till the day he died. I don't remember the day of his death, however. I spoke on the phone with him that morning, as I called him from Stateville to see if he had made up his mind about talking with Joe West. He said yes. I may as well sit down and talk with him. Wolfman was going to tell Joe West about the explosive mercury rounds he had made for me to take to Dallas to use with the XP-100 Remington Fireball. When we were talking on the phone, he also told me the day before he had been to the doctor and got a clean bill of health. He said he had a few errands to run that morning. The next I heard, he stepped out his door, then instantly had a heart attack and died. It all seemed pretty strange to me. George Corolla had always been a very healthy man. He didn't drink or smoke, and he exercised regularly. But the death certificate reads, death, natural causes. Gary Eugene Marlowe, the Raven, 1940 to 2007, was born in Bessemer, Alabama, and died in Connors, Georgia. Gary Marlowe was a childhood friend of mine. We grew up together in Melrose Park, Illinois. As we grew older, and it seemed I always had money, but no job, Gary got curious and asked if he could be of help. I started using Gary with me on a few minor jobs that were local. Those would be jobs I would be asked to do by Charles Nicoletti or Sam Giancana. A few years later, I introduced Gary to David Atlee Phillips. When David Phillips ran a check on Gary, he approved me using Gary in the Central and Southern Hemisphere. Later on, when Phillips learned that Gary loved fishing, he wanted to put Gary in charge of running a fishing camp in the Everglades that we used for running mercenaries through. Gary ran that for a while, but wanted to go back to school and finish his education. Gary grew tired of the life I was living and wanted to get out of it while he still could walk away with no problems. Me, I was too far down the road to walk away. On November 22nd, 1963, I was very surprised when the Raven showed up at my motel in Mesquite, Texas, after the assassination. After telling me he had to shoot a cop, he wanted to know if I would take his revolver back to Chicago. I told him, no, keep it and get rid of it. Get out of here. Go! If people wonder why I would be this way to a friend, it is easy to explain. I had gotten away with the Dealey Plaza crime scene with no problems. I did not need to be caught with a cop killer. Typically, the Raven was using me to take guns to Wolfman after a job, but this time it was very different, and that is why I was so short with him at the door. In 1966, I was the best man at Gary Marlowe's wedding, and honestly, I don't remember being there. If there weren't pictures to prove it, I would not believe it. This is during the time of my career with the CIA when they were doing super soldier enhancements, and I was being put through a variety of MK-Ultra programs. The Raven and I had a falling out after his brother Jay died. We didn't stay in touch, and the last time I spoke to him was in the 1970s. Tony Accardo, also known by the nicknames Joe Batters and Big Tuna Accardo, was a longtime American mobster in a criminal career that spanned 8 decades. He rose from small-time hoodlum to the position of day-to-day boss of the Chicago outfit, to ultimately becoming the final outfit authority. Accardo moved the outfit into new operations and territories, greatly increasing its power and wealth during his tenure as boss. Known as the outfit, the Boys, Capone Mob, Syndicate, Invisible Government, the Mob, Cosa Nostra, Mafia, and the Italian Organization, the Chicago branch of the crime cartel is the most politically insulated and police-pampered family this side of Sicily. After Capone, Frank Nitti took the reins until his suicide in 1943. Tony Accardo assumed the head role, even though for public consumption, Sam Giancana was the day-to-day underboss. However, Tony Accardo was on the commission, the 5 ruling families concentrated on the East Coast, and it was the commission that made decisions concerning what was best for the La Cosa Nostra. The commission members were the CEOs of operations and were the ones voting on when it was okay for a hit to be made. Also, Tony Accardo had to answer to High Larner as well. High Larner even controlled the gambling in Iran and other parts of the Middle East. Hyman Larner was an American gangster associated with Sam Giancana and the Chicago Outfit. Known in the newspapers as the Ivy League mobster, he was the head of the Chicago Outfit's slot machine racket. Larner, who was Jewish, kept a low profile, but was very powerful with the Chicago underworld. After Eddie Vogel retired from the gambling machine business, Larner became the power behind the scenes. When he testified before the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Improper Activities in Labor and Management in 1959, he evoked his Fifth Amendment rights 54 times. Larner expanded the outfit's gambling and smuggling operations to Latin America, moving the organization's Miami operation to Latin America, headquartering in Panama, where money laundering was more easily facilitated by local banks. These operations were conducted as a partnership between the Mafia and the CIA. By 1966, this partnership had developed into arms smuggling to the Middle East for the Israel Mossad. Larner had friends amongst the world leaders and key players in the Central Intelligence Agency and the U.S. military, and he was also well connected with Las Vegas bosses like the Teamsters Alan Dorfman and media mogul Hank Greenspun. One of Larner's closest friends was Mayor Lansky, and the two shared in their passionate Zionism and defense for the Jews' divine right to the land of Israel. Sam Giancana was a Sicilian-American mobster, notable for being the boss of the criminal Chicago Outfit from 1957 to 1966. His nicknames were Mooney, Momo, Mo, the Cigar, Sam the Cigar, Sam Mooney, Jay Mooney, Sam Giancani, Giancano, Giancana, and Giancane. He was born in Salvatore, Giancana, in the Patch on Chicago's west side, to Italian-Sicilian immigrants from Partana, in the province of Trapani. His father, Antonio Giancana, owned a pushcart and later briefly owned an Italian ice shop, which was later firebombed by criminal rivals of his son, Sam Giancana. Sam joined the 42 Gang, a juvenile street crew working for political boss Joseph Esposito. The names of the 42 Gang came from associating themselves with Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves. Giancana soon developed a reputation for being an excellent getaway driver, a high earner, and a vicious killer. After Esposito's murder, in which Giancana was allegedly involved, the 42 Gang was transformed into a de facto extension of the Chicago Outfit. The outfit was initially wary of the 42ers, thinking they were too wild. However, Giancana's reputation gained him the notice of outfit leaders such as Frank the Enforcer Nitti, Paul the Waiter Rica, and Tony Accardo. Giancana married Angela di Tolve, the daughter of immigrants from the Italian region of Basilicata, on September 23, 1933. They had 3 daughters. His wife died during 1954, leaving him to raise his daughters alone. Giancana was present at the Mafia's 1957 appellation meeting at the upstate New York estate of Joseph Barba. Later, Buffalo crime boss Stefano Magaddino and Giancana were overheard by wiretap, saying the meeting should have occurred in the Chicago area. Giancana claimed that the Chicago area was the safest place in the world for major underworld meetings because he had several police chiefs on his payroll. If the syndicate ever wanted to hold a meeting in or around Chicago, Giancana said they had nothing to fear because they had the area locked up tight. Some journalists claim that Giancana and his Chicago crime syndicate played a role in John F. Kennedy's victory in the 1960 presidential election. It is widely reputed and partially corroborated by the Church Committee hearings that during the Kennedy administration, the CIA recruited Giancana and other mobsters such as Johnny Roselli to assassinate Fidel Castro. Giancana reportedly said that the CIA and the Cosa Nostra were different sides of the same coin. Judith Exner claimed to be the mistress of both Giancana and JFK, and that she delivered communications between the two regarding Fidel Castro. After Giancana's return to the U.S. from Mexico, the police detailed officers to guard his house in Oak Park, Illinois. However, on the night of June 19, 1975, shortly before he was scheduled to appear before the Church Committee, which was investigating CIA and Cosa Nostra collusion, somebody recalled the police detail guarding his property. A gunman later entered Giancana's basement kitchen and shot him in the back of the head as he was frying sausage and peppers. After Giancana fell to the floor, the gunman turned him over and shot him 6 more times in the face and neck. Giancana was interred next to his wife Angelina in a family memorial at Mount Carmel Cemetery in Hillside, Illinois. Despite rumors that the CIA may have killed Giancana because of his links to the agency, former CIA Director William Colby had been quoted saying, "We had nothing to do with it." Charles Nicoletti, also known as the Typewriter and Chucky Typewriter, was a top Chicago outfit hitman under Sam Giancana, who was an underboss for Tony Accardo. Nicoletti was a syndicate enforcer in charge of planning and executing gangland murders. Nicoletti grew up in an impoverished and dysfunctional family in Chicago. His parents were both natives of Sicily. On February 25, 1929, at the age of 12, Charles shot and killed his own father, allegedly in self-defense. The 39-year-old Philip Nicoletti was a drunkard who regularly beat his wife and 2 sons. On this occasion, Philip viciously attacked his younger son and pursued him with a knife. According to Chicago police records, Charles ran into a bedroom where a gun was kept in a dresser drawer. Nicoletti was exonerated by the Cook County coroner. Nicoletti dropped out of school in the 8th grade and soon joined the 42 gang. At the time, the West Side teenage gang included such future outfit members as Sam Giancana, Sam Battaliga, Lou Farrell, Mad Sam DeFestino, William Willie Potatoes Dadino, Felix Milwaukee Phil, and many others. Most of the key figures who later formed the nucleus of Giancana's band of young bloods, a new generation of gangsters that came to power in the mid-1950s. By the late 1950s, along with Felix Alderizo, Nicoletti was one of the most feared triggermen in Chicago and was drawing attention from the FBI and the Chicago police. His legitimate business included several auto and insurance agencies, taverns, restaurants, and variety stores. Nicoletti was also a partner with James Files in a company called Metropolitan Volt, located in Main Street on Melrose Park. The company made the concrete vaults coffins were placed in. In 1962, Nicoletti took part in an infamous torture case. Nicoletti, Alderstino, and Mad Sam DeFestino had kidnapped 24-year-old Billy McCarthy, a thug who had killed 2 outfit associates with the help of Jimmy Miragili. According to James Files, Mad Sam had a torture chamber in his home basement. In the 1960s, Nicoletti was questioned by 2 FBI agents, including William Romer Jr., to see whether they could develop Nicoletti as an informant against the outfit. According to Romer, Nicoletti gave him several names of car dealerships he worked at and was very cordial. Apparently, all the employment leads checked out, but Nicoletti never flipped and never talked to the FBI again. Nicoletti was involved in as many as 60 mob hits during his career as a hitman. And as a bizarre insurance policy, Nicoletti kept a ledger, or diary, chronicling the date, who ordered the hit, and payments. Close friend and mob associate James Files revealed in 1994 from Stateville Prison that in 1963, he, Charles Nicoletti, and Johnny Roselli were part of the JFK assassination team, brought in from Chicago, and while in Dallas on November 22nd, Nicoletti was a shooter from the Dow Tex building, and Files was a shooter from the grassy knoll. Johnny Roselli was born in Esperia, Italy, and was an influential mobster for the Chicago outfit, who helped that organization control Hollywood and the Las Vegas Strip. Roselli had ties to organized crime in Los Angeles, Miami, Las Vegas, and New York. In the early 1960s, Roselli was recruited by the CIA in a plot to assassinate Fidel Castro. James Files first met Johnny Roselli through his CIA controller, David Atlee Phillips, in Miami in the early 1960s, when Files was there training Cubans for the Bay of Pigs invasion for the CIA. Files stated Roselli was the liaison between the CIA and organized crime. On June 24th and September 22nd, 1975, Roselli testified before the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, led by Idaho Senator Frank Church, about the CIA plan to kill Castro, Operation Mongoose. At the time, during the news broadcast, James Files said he saw Johnny Roselli on TV walking down the Senate steps and said to himself, "Looks like Johnny is a walking dead man." Shortly before Roselli testified, an unknown person shot and killed Giancana in the basement of his Illinois home. James Files said he saw Johnny Roselli going to Sam Giancana's home the night of his murder. The CIA wanted Sam Giancana dead, and they used Johnny Roselli to kill him. Files credits Roselli for Giancana's death. On April 23, 1976, Roselli was called before the committee to testify about a conspiracy to kill President Kennedy, 3 months after his first round of testimony on the assassination. The committee wanted to recall Roselli. However, at this point, he had been missing since July 28th. James Files has an opinion on why Johnny Roselli was murdered. Johnny Roselli was chosen by the CIA to terminate Sam Giancana before he could testify to the committee. Johnny Roselli went before the committee and testified and put family business on the street, but at the time, he had not involved the CIA. But the CIA got nervous when he started talking about organized crime. When you start talking, you never shut up. Johnny Roselli had become a loose end that had to be tied up. The CIA could not afford the risk of Johnny Roselli testifying that the CIA had sent him to kill Sam Giancana. The CIA had Johnny Roselli killed, and it was done in such a way that it was blamed on organized crime. David Atlee Phillips, 1922 to 1988, was a Central Intelligence Agency officer of 25-plus years and a recipient of the Career Intelligence Medal. Phillips was born in Fort Worth, Texas, and attended the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia, and Texas Christian University in Fort Worth. Phillips was an actor prior to World War II. During the war, he served as a nose gunner in the United States Air Forces. He was shot down over Austria and captured by the Germans, but was somehow able to escape and make it back to Allied lines. Phillips rose to become the CIA's chief of operations for the Western Hemisphere. In 1975, he founded the Association of Former Intelligence Officers, an alumni association compromising intelligence officers from around the services. James Files first met David Phillips in late 1960 when he was at the Veterans Hospital for a 90-day observation after returning from Laos. Phillips came into the room and asked if he was Jimmy Sutton. Sutton/Files replied he was. After introducing himself as David Phillips, he wanted to know if Files was interested in paramilitary training of Cubans with weapons and explosives. Having his attention and curiosity, Files wanted to know more. Phillips said he had read his entire central file and was interested in using him in operations in Florida. After hearing what had happened in Southeast Asia, Ted Shackley had recommended Files to Phillips. Phillips said he had some people he wanted Files to meet and work with. Phillips had already made discharge arrangements, so they left the hospital together that day and headed to Florida. Upon arriving there, Phillips introduced him to Frank Sturgis, Barry Seal, Louis Corrales, Antonio Vicinira, Orlando Botch, and a few other Cubans at one of their training camps in the Everglades. This training was in preparation for the Bay of Pigs invasion, which happened in April 1961. David Phillips was the CIA controller and handler for both James Files and Lee Harvey Oswald. Phillips instructed Oswald and James Files to meet him at the Texas Theater if anything went wrong when Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas. Part 2. Covert Orchestration, Phillips, Lansdale, Marlowe, and the CIA. In the shadow war of the Cold War era, few operatives wielded more clandestine influence than CIA officer David Atlee Phillips. Phillips, chief architect of covert operations and propaganda across Latin America, was at the heart of the agency's anti-Castro crusade, running operations from CIA stations in Mexico City and Miami. Phillips directed propaganda and espionage efforts, overseeing figures like Lee Harvey Oswald, whom the CIA watched closely in Mexico City just weeks before Kennedy's assassination. But Oswald was not Phillips' only covert asset. Former Chicago mob hitman James Files explicitly named Phillips as a CIA handler, the man responsible for coordinating Files' movements leading to Dallas.
I want to say one thing. I have not said that there was not a conspiracy to kill Jack Kennedy. The statement was made earlier by Mark himself, quoting my book. I've been talking about those things I know about and what I'm convinced. I don't know what happened in Dallas. What I'm trying to say today is let's find out. The investigation has now been going on for almost a year, and in the meantime, let's don't do it with gamesmanship.
May we thank our participants.
Operating alongside Phillips was General Edward Lansdale, the CIA's legendary PSYOPs strategist. Lansdale had masterminded regime changes in Southeast Asia, applying psychological warfare tactics honed in the Philippines and Vietnam. His techniques of manipulation, propaganda, and assassination were unparalleled. James Files describes Lansdale as more than just a name. He was present on the ground in Dallas itself.
You sent a memo to Defense Secretary McNamara on January 17th, 1961, just before the Kennedy inauguration. And there's a phrase that was in that memo. You said, "There are practically no George Washingtons, Thomas Jeffersons, or Tom Paines in Saigon today." What did you mean by that?
By referring to Americans in the American Revolution, I am naming such people in this memo that I wrote after my trip out in Vietnam in the end of 1960. I was trying to tell American leaders who were making policy that they were looking to at a country in a time of its peril and of its great need, to not think of them in ordinary terms. That we had our George Washington, we had Tom Paine, we had Ben Franklin, but they didn't out there, and they couldn't solve problems the way we Americans thought they should. They had to solve it from their own backgrounds and their own ways. And if we saw people that didn't look as big in stature as our own heroes from our own revolution, we should have some compassion and some understanding and empathy with the people who are in a tough spot and help them overcome some of their difficulties without just saying, "You must do this," or "We want you to do this," and then walking away, and when it didn't done the way we'd like to see it, just be hypercritical of their performance.
But Phillips and Lansdale did not operate alone. Supporting their shadow operations was another CIA-linked operative named Gary Marlowe, known to insiders as the Raven. Marlowe conducted black operations frequently alongside Files, often handling covert weapons and cleanup assignments. Marlowe's presence in Dallas, as confirmed by Files, suggests a deeper layer of contingency, a second operative assigned to remove loose ends like Oswald and possibly Tippit. Files' accounts match known covert practices, redundant planning, multiple shooters, and plausible deniability.
The CIA picked me up. They took me from the Army. They wanted me from the Army. And the Army, they shredded my 201, turned me over to the CIA. And that's, like I say, I went from there. I got out of the Veterans Hospital in Broadview, Illinois, and went down to Florida, met Frank Sturgis. He was the first one I met. David Phillips woke me out of the hospital, and I never looked back. It was pretty interesting, down there. So we got through with that. I was there for the Bay of Pigs and for the second invasion when everybody got arrested, and then the Kennedy deal come along, and Operation Group 40 was formed, and George Bush recruited for it. Luis Posada Corrales and I, we were the first two recruited for Operation Group 40. What was a worldwide assassination group. We were based out of Mexico City, and finally Kennedy comes along, and Kennedy's got to go. The reason they wanted to get rid of Kennedy was he gave his famous speech, beat on the podium, and said he was going to break the CIA to 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the wind, and what's left he would give to the JCS. The reason he wanted to do that was the CIA went around him to kill a general in Europe when the British asked us to help them with it, and John F. Kennedy said, "We will not supply the technology, the weaponry, nor the personnel. Forget it." Well, General got died. Kennedy was upset over that.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it.
The CIA's covert network reached higher still, extending to powerful American politicians. Future President George H.W. Bush, documented in FBI files released decades later, was reportedly briefed on an anti-Castro operation just days after the assassination.
After a deluded gunman assassinated President Kennedy, our nation turned to Gerald Ford and a select handful of others to make sense of that madness. And the conspiracy theorists can say what they will, but the Warren Commission report will always have the final, definitive say on this tragic matter. Why? Because Jerry Ford put his name on it, and Jerry Ford's word was always good.
And Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson maintained close ties with operatives who would later be implicated in suspicious deaths connected to the JFK case, notably through his aide, Mac Wallace.
It's sure good to see you. How's life treating you today?
Well, Saul, it's been a pretty touch and go situation. Lyndon and I have had quite a few unpleasant words here lately over the deal with that he hired Mike Wallace to assassinate the president. It's been hectic in every way, but we've lived through it this far. I guess we'll continue to do so. Lyndon should have never issued that order to Mike, but we've had our differences, and I'm a true blue to Lyndon, as I've always been, and tried to carry out every order that he'd ever given me. But this is one I'll probably never be able to forget. And the times that we've had in Texas, and the embarrassment that Lyndon had gotten from Kennedy, I guess there wasn't anything else to do but what he did.
Well, you know, Lyndon could have really hit me if he would.
Well, Lyndon's the kind of person that doesn't want to help anyone. He's all for Lyndon, and that's the way he's pretty much always been.
Well, they had me backed up on that Henry Marshall killing, and they just kind of blackmailed me to keep my mouth shut. And if I hadn't had a bunch of tapes that I'd played after I got killed, because, 17 got killed in this situation very mysteriously. And I've done a lot of time, and I've lost a lot of money, and hurt my family a whole lot. And it's really got me just disgusted with Lyndon in one way. In one way, I feel real sorry for him. But I really feel like that in Lyndon's heart, he felt like that he was doing the right thing. He felt like that he was the savior of the common man. I feel like that in his heart he wanted to help people that had not. But I don't believe that anything, my church background would have never let me sanction all the killings that he has done. What do you think about it, Cliff? Do you really believe that it could have been handled anyway without killing all these people and got rid of the Kennedys? You think he would have won the election against him?
Well, I don't really believe so. He tried desperately to do just that, and there didn't seem to be any other way. I know that he regrets a lot of things that he has done, but still, it's been a battle from day one.
Well, Dale, I sure do appreciate all the things that you've done for us, and I appreciate the trust that I have. Yeah, you've had anytime. For a long-time friend, and I'm just sorry that I've embarrassed all my friends and put all my friends through this. Oh, you didn't embarrass me. And what I was really afraid of, my brother Bob that got killed, our plane was down at Bryan the day that Mike Wallace tie him into the thing, and we couldn't afford to. In fact, Pam started to write a book, and when she really got scared when she got into the thing. It was just too scary a deal. But anyhow, this too will pass. Well, it's been a long old journey. What do you think about F.O. Bankston?
Well, W.O. was a great leader, and he's been probably one of the best things that ever happened in Dallas, Texas. Of course, he's got a lot of real good friends, and Lyndon's been one of his true buddies for many years. And anything that he just has to have, W.O. will see that it's done.
Well, I just can't believe that F.O. Bankston has the power over the police department that he has. He buys every year, the sheriff buys him a brand new car, Bill Decker, and I just don't see how politically that he can get with it. But nobody will ever understand, and really in the early years I thought that Lyndon really had a mission from a higher power, who I choose to call God, to carry out a lot of things for the common people. And I really believe in his heart that he thought that he was destined to rule the people. How do you size up Lyndon Cliff after all these years of horror?
Well, actually, Lyndon's just been kind of going downhill health-wise and politically wise. He's just wore out, and I feel like he's come to his end of his rope. But all these things that's been eating on him for all these years have just now taken its course. And I feel like Lyndon's done a lot of good things in his life, and he's done a lot of bad things.
But Cliff, I hate to see you so downtrodden and so discouraged, and I just hope that you can get a hold of yourself and not be so tore up. But anyhow, let's go in the house and let's have a cup of coffee and something to eat. Okay?
Sounds good to me. Bye.
The Kennedy assassination was not the act of one lone gunman. It was orchestrated by skilled CIA operatives, strategic planners, and covert assassins. David Atlee Phillips, Ed Lansdale, and Gary Marlowe each played critical roles. Operatives whose true stories only emerge clearly now, decades later. As we unravel this tangled web, their involvement transforms our understanding of history, revealing a hidden structure behind one of America's darkest days.
Were you a CIA contractor? How would you have described your
asset? CIA asset.
Asset. Okay. Now,
I call David Phillips every day to see what assignments they had for me.
Yeah, David.
If they didn't have
Phillips.
nothing, I worked for the Chicago mob. And if they had something, then I went to the airport and got on the plane and went and took care of business. I had Colonel Fletcher Prouty as my commanding officer at that time.
You see, if you think seriously about this business of assassination, it's stereotyped, isn't it? Kennedy assassinated by a lone nut. Bobby Kennedy assassinated. James Earl Ray is a lone nut killing Martin Luther King and so on. Let's go one step ahead into the professional part of assassinations, because you can see right away this other story breaks down. When it was the objective of this government to assassinate Castro, the Bay of Pigs failed miserably because it was an over-the-beach landing, and we got involved with that, and that was so they created an organization called Mongoose. Mongoose was the cover word for it. Now, the objective of the Mongoose program, for those people who understood it, was to assassinate Castro by any means. And as we found out later during hearings in the 70s, we even used mafia hitmen, skilled mechanics, skilled killers. We used poisoned things. We used all kinds of... There's a lady that used to be a friend of Castro's, I think, that said she was being sent back there to feed him some pills or something that would kill him, and on and on and on, all kinds of things. But here's what we need to get from the format of that story, is that Mongoose is an organization created by the United States government to commit assassinations. Never mind Castro. It was created for assassinations. Now these people are selected, trained, equipped for that purpose, to get in there and shoot somebody and get out. And the getting out part is the hard part. That's where they need the rest of the organization. The hitmen are probably 4 or 5 experienced people that can do the job from any angle with any weapon and do it right. But to get them out of there and what the patterns are and how you're going to do it is a very intricate thing. So you have to have a trained program. And in this case, we called it Mongoose. Now, there's no reason to believe that Mongoose ended when somebody decided that, well, we're not going to kill Castro this year, we'll let it go. But Mongoose is an Assassination Incorporated organization. I've seen it used in foreign countries with the same men, the same people. And these are not all Americans. They're people who are mercenaries. They're people who have reasons, they think, for being in this kind of program. They live that life. They have families they're taken care of, and this is their business. And to think that it's put together for one assassination or for another assassination is not an understanding of the program. It's a permanent part of things. It's unfortunate that it is, but it is. It's a permanent part of things, and very carefully programmed and very carefully supported. Just consider, Kennedy was killed in 1963. I don't know a single newspaper in the United States that will print the words that Kennedy was killed by anyone other than Oswald. There's still a control. Well, a Mongoose-type professional organization sees to it that the conditioning of even newspapers persists. Or another way to say it is that the pressures on the newspapers persist. Mongoose is a real strong program. Now, I'm overworking one code name, but you see what I mean. It's what Lyndon Johnson called Murder Incorporated, and it's a continuing operation.
While operatives like David Atlee Phillips and Ed Lansdale had confirmed ties to the CIA, another name has persisted in the fog of assassination research: Roscoe White, a Dallas police officer, a former Marine, a man whose history may connect him to both the CIA and to Lee Harvey Oswald.
It's 1973 when this movie Executive Action, starring Burt Lancaster, hits theaters across the country. The movie is based on the book Rush to Judgment by author and Washington attorney Mark Lane. This Hollywood version of the assassination of President Kennedy would for the first time allege a conspiracy.
Secret Service are under regular orders to stay with the president no matter what happens. Once they get him to the hospital, they'll probably filter back. But for at least a half hour, you should be entirely free of them.
I'll have 6 men with Secret Service credentials in Dealey Plaza. Their insignia for this trip, incidentally, is double white bars on red.
Lane, who wrote the screenplay, says orders from upper management forced him to take out any CIA connection in the plot. Lane says the movie was a financial success, but short-lived. 2 weeks after its premiere, it was pulled out of theaters, and by 6 months would completely disappear until 1991, when it was released again, this time on video. But whose order did the film get pulled? Lane says no one knows for sure. Let's now fast forward to 1975. Allegations of a cover-up explode when Americans see for the first time Kennedy's execution. It's called the Zapruder film, shot by Abraham Zapruder, who captured the president's arrival in Dealey Plaza.
As the car came down, the last shot hit him on the stretcher in front of us.
Researchers say as you look closely at the film, it shows the probability Kennedy could have been shot by a bullet fired from the front. Although he didn't know it at the time, in 1975, the same year the Zapruder film was released, Midlander Ricky White would have a brush with his father's secret identity. An identity he says he now knows as the gunman behind the grassy knoll.
In 1975, in Paris, Texas, there was a break-in where Ricky White and his mother lived. And the people that broke in stole a box of material, assassination-related material. In this box of material were all of these photographs that Roscoe White had.
Howard says the men who burglarized the Whites' home were arrested in Arizona with the stolen photos still in their possession.
The police took the material out of the car. They realized it was assassination-related, so they informed the FBI. The FBI comes in, and lo and behold, there's a photograph of Oswald no one's ever seen before.
A year later, in 1976, the stolen photos turn up in Washington, D.C., in the hands of the newly formed House Select Committee on Assassinations. Members of the committee traveled to Paris, Texas, to talk with Ricky White and his mother. Out of the blue, they asked Geneva White if she's ever worked for Jack Ruby. She denies it. In 1978, a family friend, who we will call John Doe, warns Ricky that the House Select Committee is going to peg his father as the #1 shooter in the Kennedy assassination. Ricky doesn't believe him, but when the committee volumes, Roscoe White's name is mentioned in the investigation.
So even in 78, the House Select Committee knew about Roscoe White, but never followed up on it.
And though Geneva White denied it in the late 70s, what reason would the House Select Committee have to ask if she had ever worked for Jack Ruby? We may never know, but what we do know is that more than 10 years later, Geneva would admit to Ricky that she in fact had worked for Ruby in 1963, just prior to the assassination of the president. That revelation came after her picture was spotted in a magazine with none other than Jack Ruby.
In the 1950s, White and Oswald were reportedly stationed at Astugi Naval Air Station in Japan, home to a major CIA surveillance hub during the Cold War. While this overlap is not definitive proof of CIA recruitment, it places White in proximity to known intelligence activity. In 1990, White's son Ricky White alleged that his father had left behind a diary confessing involvement in the assassination of President Kennedy and claimed Roscoe was working under a CIA cover assignment.
Ricky White's father, Roscoe, died in 1971 after he was burned over 95% of his body in what Ricky says was a suspicious fire. Ricky says 7 years later, in 1978, a family friend told him his father was about to be implicated in the Kennedy killing by the House Select Committee on Assassinations.
And at that time, 2 weeks after our visit, they did come out with a verdict, but they were 99% sure that they was a grassy knoll assassin. I mean, they couldn't prove who he was or where he came from, but they knew that there was a man standing there at the grassy knoll.
Still, Ricky says he didn't believe his father's friend, who we will call John Doe, to protect his identity.
He had just got out of the hospital. He had been shot twice in the abdomen and had probably been left to die. And
this person, John Doe.
Yes, it was a very good friend of my father's before he died.
Ricky says he didn't believe what John Doe told him that night in 1978 until 1985, when he started reading his father's diary.
When I came across a part in the diary which was leading up to the assassination, and then that's when I realized that John Doe was telling me the truth.
Ricky says his father's diary didn't become interesting until he read up through the year 1960.
And then from 1960 on, my father lived a very interesting life, a double life than anything that I ever knew of him.
Can you tell us some specifics?
Not a record, I can't. I mean, there's known things that my father was involved with that I'd rather just stick with the John F. Kennedy.
Although Ricky chose to reveal little about John Doe's identity, Reverend Jack Shaw, another family friend, did tell us what Ricky's mother told him about the man.
That person had been doubling for Oswald to give Oswald an alibi or to set Oswald up related to being in another location, specifically in Mexico, coming out of the Russian embassy. I got the impression that he was flying in from somewhere else. Not just him, but others were flying in and would be in place for taking care of the assassination.
Could this man possibly be John Doe?
Yes.
Sources close to John Doe tell us that since he learned of our plans to report on the Kennedy assassination, he has disappeared. If I tell you that John Doe is man, and if I'm right, will you tell me more?
Well, if you turn that camera off, we'll talk.
The diary, never fully authenticated, describes White as receiving orders to eliminate Kennedy. It also references a mission to kill Lee Harvey Oswald, raising suspicion that White may have been one of the several individuals tasked with ensuring Oswald was silenced. According to files, he never personally crossed paths with White, yet multiple researchers have pointed out that White's alleged assignment overlaps with the same operational goals. Both men, White and Files, claim that they were backed by intelligence networks. Both describe coordinated efforts involving multiple shooters, multiple fallback plans, and CIA-connected handlers. White allegedly wore a Dallas police uniform the day of the assassination. Files concealed a Remington XP-100 behind the picket fence. While no document has surfaced proving a direct link between Roscoe White and the CIA handlers like David Atlee Phillips or Ed Lansdale, White's connection to the agency has not been dismissed by all researchers, and his diary was reportedly taken away by the FBI in 1985. Whether Roscoe White was another piece of the same machine or a separate operator running parallel is still unknown, but like James Files, his name remains embedded in the layers of cover, contingency, and conspiracy that surround Dealey Plaza.
You said Roscoe White, right? That's your book?
Yes.
Do you think James Files was one of the shooters?
Don't get me started on James Files. No, James Files, I think, is a liar. He's in prison, and he supposedly has nothing to do but listen to other people tell stories and read books, and I don't believe him. Here's a quick story about James Files. James Files was a convict who was arrested for some offense and put in prison, and then all of a sudden, about 10, 15 years ago, he comes forward and says, I was the one shot President Kennedy behind the fence. Well, how old were you? I was 17. Okay. What were you doing? Well, I was a chauffeur for the mob, and then all of a sudden, the day of the assassination, they called me and said, hey, can you step in for this guy? Our shooter has got a cold or something. Can you step in? Oh, sure, I can do that. Well, what I did was I watched it with the audio on my TV, and I had just, like a month before, had come back from an advanced interrogation school, Reed Interrogation School, where we read body language and nonverbal cues of deception. This guy has nothing but deception in his voice. So I turned the audio down and just watched his face. He's lying. The only thing he said was true. He's in prison. His name is James Files, which really isn't his real name. So he's in prison. That's the only truth he said. Yes.
I wonder is there someone, is the mafia responsible? Is Johnson responsible? Do you have
Keep going.
theory on?
Keep going.
Oh.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The mob had the connection to Jack Ruby. Jack Ruby was connected to the mob, and they made him an offer he couldn't refuse. My scenario is that Oswald was supposed to get killed in the book depository by some hero cop. And when he got away, they all went, oh, what now? What does he tell? Excuse my language. What is he telling these cops? So now they had to get rid of him. He's in police custody. We can't walk in there and kill him. Hey, we got a guy who knows every cop in town. Let's get Jack. Jack, you'll be a hero. Okay. So they bring Oswald out. Jack steps up. Boom, it's over with. You're a hero. Oh, you're going to get the death penalty. He got the death penalty because they injected him with cancer, and he died in jail before his appeal could go through.
One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is the JFK files. And one of the things that you said was that if they showed you what they showed me, this was your quote, you wouldn't want people to know it either.
So I opened them up partially. I was met with, from good people, good people. People that were well-meaning. Mike Pompeo was one of them. He's a good person. They called me, they said, sir, would rather have you not. And I did open them, but I was asked by some people not to open them. There's a Martin Luther King file too, by the way, that they'd like to see. I don't know if you know, but there is that. But JFK in particular. So they called me, a lot of good people called me, people that that you would find reasonable people, and they asked me not to do it. So I said, well, we'll close it for another time. But if I win, I'm going to open them up. I'm just going to open enough.
Why didn't you open it up the first time?
Because
though?
a lot of times,
what was the hesitation? Though?
Addresses, people that are still living. There are people that are affected. And there could be some national security reason that that I don't have to necessarily know about. But some very good, talented people asked me not to do it. I opened it up, and then they said, would it be possible for us to do that a different day?
How much of it did you read into?
I think it's going to be just fine to open it. Let me put it that way. I think it's fine. It's going to be time. It's a cleansing. It's really a cleansing. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it immediately, almost immediately upon entering office.
Well,
I really appreciate you talking about Jimmy, I see you wear lots of MAGA stuff, and there were some letters. Have you been in correspondence with Trump? Does he know about you and your story?
We've got one. He knows about me and the story. Yeah. He's known about me for a long time. He sent my wife and me a letter.
He sent you a letter?
Yeah.
Anything related to the records release or anything? He went.
No, but the judge had called him and asked him to release 8 criminals. He released all 8. When he called the judge up, the judge told him, fine, said you did what you said you would do here, but you broke your word on the Kennedy assassination, the Kennedy papers. He said, you broke your word, you only released part of them. And he told the judge, in Kennedy's word, he said, Judge, he said, if you would have read what I read and seen what I seen, you'd break your word too.
Told the judge not to have that.
Is this about the spot you were in?
I just
You want to go to it?
Kind of thing.
You want to go to your best recollection?
Right here. Right here. Get over here and look. Yeah. I laid the tilted pearl on the 42, scanned the crowd with the scope. I was looking for bulges, for people that might be carrying weapons that could be a threat. And there was no badge man. Had there been a badge man with a rifle there, he would have been the second one to die right after Kennedy, within, I would say, 4 seconds. Basically here, and I searched, it looked like old Homewood. A lot of the Cubans were here, Frank Sturgis was here, George Bush was here, everybody was here. So everybody wanted to see it happen, I guess. It was no secret that Kennedy was going to get it.
James, some of us didn't hear. Why did you kill Kennedy?
Why? My orders. I was sent here.
By who?
I was sent here by the Chicago outfit. And you don't say no to them when they offer you a job. You do the job, or you're going to be trunk music, and you wind up in the trunk.
Okay.
And I carried a lot of people away in the trunk to the cornfield and buried them there. I had a backhoe digger there.
Okay. Is this fence being moved back?
Pardon me?
Is this fence being moved back?
It's been moved up here twice since '63. Just recently moved up to this spot here.
Like based on the picture that I seen, like Mary Morgan's shot, there's one tree basically. All these other ones moved in front.
Right.
And that would be that tree over there, wouldn't it?
Well, there's a ledge, I think it's still there, that you can see where they've got the thing holding the soil up.
Yeah.
You know, you can look down there and see where the fence used to be.
So that's the fence has been
Yeah.
moved.
And then since last year, the fence has been moved up here to this spot.
But you were about 8 feet from the corner of the original fence.
8 to 10 feet, yeah.
Yeah. Is based on the Norman feature, that tree would have been about 8 feet from the corner of the fence that, like from the pictures that are available from that time. And so.
Well, let's put it this way. If there would have been someone there with a rifle in front of me, not knowing who they were, with everybody seeing them and me back here, believe me, I would have had no trouble dropping the hammer from the 45 on him. I used a 221 on JFK. On the way out, I had the 45 in my right pocket, or under my belt, and then I had a grenade in my left pocket, the briefcase in my right hand. So I had no intentions of stopping, no intentions of giving up, not after you shot the president.
I'm not saying there was another person 8 feet down, like in front of you. I'm saying that the distance has changed somewhat because the fence location has changed. That big tree is the tree that was about 8 feet-ish.
Yeah, I know. The first time I come back here was in 2016. That's when they released me from prison, May of 2016.
Part of the deal with the CIA and the mob overlay is the CIA wanted the mob to do some of their work sometimes and blame it on the mob, right? And I think, that's your testimony.
Johnny was relations between them
CIA and the mob.
And so he was in Dallas when Kennedy was shot. And why do you talk about why you think that was? Why do you think they sent Johnny to Dallas?
Well, he was with Chuck in the Daltech building.
No, the cover about Tosh and those guys flying in with the board game and all that, and then why Johnny wouldn't shoot.
But so he was in the Daltech building with Chuck Nicolay.
Yeah, that's why he was there.
But
he was the second. He was going to be secondary shooter. He was going to fire with Chuck.
But he did.
But Lansdale had gotten the change. We figured it was Lansdale that had changed because Lansdale wanted me there and I had already chosen the picket fence, and Lansdale trusted me because I did several assignments for Lansdale, and I'd never blown one of them. Every one of them was complete. I got away with every one of them.
Wow. And so at the last minute, so there's two things that, well, not two things. One of the things that people say, that's the Remington, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the fireball.
You said Lansdale, and another time you said Phillips gave you this. Did Lansdale give you this fire?
Phillips gave me that. Lansdale didn't.
But he told you to go use it somewhere in another country for the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
and there was
and Lansdale knew you could shoot that bad boy.
Yeah, he knew
He knew he wouldn't miss.
Yeah.
If he had one shot, he wouldn't miss.
How big is that gun? I see the picture, but is it as big as your arm, or how big is a Remington?
It's
fireball.
I don't know from the elbow out to the wrist here.
Yeah.
And it's got a scope on it. You don't really need a scope, but at 100 yards, it'll take a man's head off if you got the right load in it.
Well, it did from 80 feet, right? That's what.
And in 1969, I won't say who before, but I took a Chinese general out. 1,400 yards.
Not with this.
Not with that, no. That was with the XM21. And after it had been proven and tested in the field, they removed the X, because the X is an experimental model, and it was called the M21, which was a modified M14.
So you said you shot a Chinese general from 1,400 yards.
Yeah, at that time. That was a hell of a shot at that time in 69. Today, we've got confirmed kills of 2 miles.
I know, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. So, all right, James. So when the day you were in Dallas, you didn't even know you were shooting. You were going to be involved. You were just driving.
I was a driver and a weapons bearer. I took several weapons to Dallas.
And until the morning of, Mr. I don't know the name.
Nicoletti, Charles Nicoletti.
No, not Nicoletti, but who's the guy that said, "I want you, not Roselli, taking the shot"? You said
General
Nicoletti.
And Lansdale.
Lansdale showed up later, right before the assassination, but Chuck had asked me a couple hours prior to that.
Okay.
Because it already told Johnny Roselli he was going to back down, that he was not going to be the shooter. He was only going to police Chucky's brass as he ejected it.
Okay, and so when you say they, who would have been the they? It would have said it to Mr. Roselli.
That would have been Lansdale.
Lansdale. And so I don't know who Lansdale is.
General Lansdale. Oh. He was Air Force, yeah.
He was Air Force.
I always put it this way. He was Air Force, he was Army, he was whatever he wanted to be.
He worked for Allen Dulles.
We would walk into the Air Force base and we'd get with paperwork and we'd withdraw a couple of planes, and they used to crack because they knew they wasn't getting them back. And the first time he got me out, I went to Scotland to meet Lansdale.
I got it.
And I sit there at the Air Force base on the floor, my legs stretched out reading the manual, and somebody walked up and kicked my foot, and I was ready to get him to kick somebody bottom end because they kicked him. But that was a challenge to me.
Right.
I looked up, and here's a guy in uniform with all the salad on his blouse, and I looked at him, and I said, and he says, "I hear you're a cowboy." And I said, "You might say that." And he says, "Come to me, I got you for the next couple of weeks."
Wow.
How is it possible that anyone at Dealey Plaza that day, and here these men are probably being marched across there 5 minutes after the president was killed. Every man's looking at nobody. And I recognized immediately that man is General Lansdale. Now, Lansdale is a very interesting figure in the Kennedy era. And I know Lansdale. I worked with him off and on from about 1952 to 1963. So he retired. Now, this is interesting. He retired from the Air Force on October 31st, 1963. Well, of course, the picture could have been 100 other people, and I could be wrong, because these pictures were taken by a professional news cameraman. I got a clear picture. And I started mailing the picture to acquaintances of mine and acquaintances of Lansdale who knew him without any of my thoughts. I simply would send the picture and say, "Can you tell me what this looks like to you?" This was taken shortly after the death of the president, and I wonder if this picture
calls anything to mind to you. You'd be amazed to find that from senior people in the government, such as Lansdale was or such as I was at the time, I got immediate confirmation. That's Ed Lansdale. Well, now, I don't know why he was in Dallas. I can't go into that.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
We need to have more transparency in our government, and he's keeping his promise to have the government tell the truth to the American people about everything.
However, JFK's grandson, Jack Schlossberg, criticized the president's move on social media, posting, quote, "Declassification is using JFK as a political prop when he's not here to punch back, and there's nothing heroic about it."
Well, when it comes to giving somebody up, I've never given up anybody in my life. I'm not going to put anybody in prison. And as a matter of fact, you probably couldn't get the FBI to admit to it, but when a couple of their people forced their way into Stateville, I was offered all kind of deals and all kind of agreements if I would not give an interview on John F. Kennedy before.
2 FBI agents came to my facility at Stateville without me knowing, is reference to a conversation I had with James File where he mentioned in passing that he was going to have problems with his appeal because 2 FBI agents had threatened him about his willingness to speak openly about the JFK assassination, and that that could cause him problems in his appeal. Well, I really didn't think much about it at the time, except for the fact that a light bulb went on above my head and said, well, wait a minute, what FBI agents? And he said, and he swore up and down there were FBI agents that came to visit him. Well, I thought I finally, I got him now. I've got him in a lie. Because I would have been the first to know, or the second after the gatehouse officer. I should have been the second to know that there were FBI agents at my gatehouse, let alone inside my facility. Come to find out that, yeah, in fact, they interviewed him. How did I find out? Well, while I was researching the possibility of FBI agents entering my facility without me knowing, I got a call from one of them who admitted to me, yeah, he came to see Files on such and such a date. So I backtracked it and found the entry finally in the gatehouse, where they had, in fact, come in and interviewed James Files. And there was a case where, unbeknownst to James, I was researching, I wanted to catch him so badly, I wanted to catch him in a lie. And he was telling the truth.
Are you remorseful about shooting Kennedy?
For many years, no, I wasn't. But as the time goes by, I'm not saying remorseful for shooting Kennedy. Maybe I'm more remorseful for how it affected this country and for the things it's done. Maybe John F. Kennedy did do some good things for this country. I'm not really sure. But I got a lot of remorse for a lot of things that I've done. But that's for the simple reason I've got my life turned around a little bit. So I can't be as hard as I used to be. I try to have a lot of compassion for my fellow man. But for John F. Kennedy, gotta be honest, yeah, let's say I got a little remorse there for him because, not specifically maybe him, but like for his family, for the kids and all. But at the time when we acted, I felt that I was right in what we were doing.
How much money were you paid for your participation on November 22nd, 1963?
Well, the money that I received for that job in Dallas, I'd never asked for a specified amount. I'd never even asked for any money. I was just honored to do it with Mr. Nicoletti. But I had received $30,000 a short period thereafter. I remember there's 2-3 weeks went by, maybe a month even, before I met him one evening. He gave me an envelope and I asked him, I said, what's this for? And he said, this is for down in Texas. He said, you did excellent. The only thing he did, he criticized me once. He asked me, he says, when I left Ely Plaza that day and got in the car with them, he says, don't you think you overreacted? And I says, what do you mean? He says, maybe you shot too fast. Because I know they didn't want a shot coming to the front. They tried to put everything from the back side. And I told him at that point, I said, well, it's my last chance for the option. I said, if I didn't fire at that point, I couldn't fire without endangering Jackie.
Jimmy and Joe West notes and in Don Irving's interview notes with you, and in what you told me before, you told me you received $15,000.
$15,000.
You just said 30.
I just said 30.
How much did you receive?
All total, it was 30. I didn't want to say to you, I'm telling you the truth. I got 30,000 on the first part. I cut it in half from the beginning at 15 because There was an awful lot of money back then, and I didn't really think it mattered that much. And I didn't really plan to tell what money I got to it until I talked to Joe on that. But the total figure was 30.
Okay. I just want to clarify.
I'm clarifying everything now. We've been playing straight
That's
ball.
the only
since.
difference you've ever told me right there.
Well, in the beginning, I said 15 because I didn't think it mattered that much what the amount was. But since we've been playing square ball with everything else, and I've given you everything that I have, I'm not going to go back on that part. I'm just going to give you the actual figure, and that's what it was, and I never received no more, no less. The next money I received after that was for something else that we had done. But like I say, as far as I know, that's what the money I received was for Dallas when he gave me that envelope. Because I never took checks. He gave me cash, and I usually got money every other week from him, just for local work around town.
When did you first meet Lee Harvey Oswald?
Excuse me. I first met Lee Harvey Oswald in, God, it was back in early '63. We were running weapons down to, I believe it was '63. We were running guns down there when I first met him, and I met him through David Alley Phillips. And Lee Harvey Oswald and I had never been friends at that point or anything. We became more friends that we in Dallas together. But I had met him down there in New Orleans, and outside of New Orleans in a little town, I believe it was called Clinton down there. But I'd been taking down some semi-automatic 45 caliber perp guns. They were made, I believe, by Knoxville Arms at that time.
Am I to understand that Lee Harvey Oswald was working for the CIA?
Lee Harvey Oswald had the same controller that I had, David Alley Phillips, because David Alley Phillips introduced me to him.
And so that means that you have worked for the CIA also?
I had involvement with the CIA, yes.
Can you talk about any of that?
I don't wish to touch base with the CIA, and I think some of the people that you have dealt with, you recently found confirming proof of what I have told you through their knowledge and what they found out about the CIA. But I don't want to touch base or get back into CIA operations because it doesn't pertain to a lot of this other stuff.
Is there anything you can tell me about the death of Officer J.D. Tippit?
I do not wish to touch base on that. I have no comment on that.
Do you know who killed him?
Yes, I do.
Is the man still alive?
The man that killed T.J. Tippit is still alive. He was alive as of 3 years ago. I haven't talked to him in the past 3 years. But Lee Harvey Oswald did not kill T.J. Tippit. Because the man that killed the police officer that afternoon had come by my hotel and told me, he said, things got messed up today. He said, and I killed a cop. And my remarks to that was, well, you did what you had to do. And he left shortly thereafter.
So then there was one other person that was part of the team other than you and Nicolette Roselli?
The person I'm referring to now was not a part of the team to assassinate John F. Kennedy. As far as I know, his job would have been to kill Lee Harvey Oswald, from what I understood, without asking any direct questions, because I did not want to know what anyone else was doing. All I wanted to know was what my assignment was, what I was to do, and the least I know about other people, the better off I am, because I didn't want very many people knowing who I was or what I'm doing.
Would you have known who would have given him orders to kill Officer Tippit?
No, I would not, because that contract would have come from a different source.
Did you see Jack Ruby in that plaza that day?
Yes, Jack Ruby was in the plaza that day.
Where was he?
At one point, he was standing on the same side with his back to me from the grassy knoll, down close to the sidewalk. But I didn't watch other people in the plaza that day. I scanned the crowd. I just seen a few faces. But I was solely concentrated for the few moments that I had the weapon out looking through the scope. I was concentrating on the primary target. And when that was over with, I wasn't looking behind me to see who was coming or who was running. And I remember when the shots had been fired and it was all over, nobody responded immediately. I don't care how fast they say the police acted. People were stopped. They were stunned, including the police officers. And the police officers on the motorcycles, it took them, I'm going to say, maybe 10 seconds before they even responded to what was happening. It's like everybody was waiting for someone to tell them what to do. And at that point, I started to walk away. There had been a couple of people in the vicinity that I was in. I'm going to say probably 15 yards in front of me, close to the edge of the fence where I was at. And I was about 15 feet from the end of it. As I was walking away, the police were running up the grassy knoll and other people, and I know these two men were turning people back. Who they were, I don't know. I didn't bother to turn and look back. I kept walking away.
Did you notice a man dressed in a suit and tie And I believe he had a hat on with a camera up on the pergola.
No, I did not notice him.
I'm talking about Abraham Zapruder.
Yeah, I did not notice him. I was still walking. But if I would have seen someone making my picture at that point, I don't understand what my reaction would have been.
The car wanted in connection with the assassination of President Kennedy has been stopped in Fort Worth. Police report that the suspect in the shooting is in custody. Further word will come later. Fort Worth is 30 miles west of Dallas. Just a few minutes before this report, we heard from one of our newsmen in Dallas on the scene, James Kerr, who said that a Dallas policeman, J.D. Tippit, was shot to death by an unknown man in a car minutes after the president and Governor Connally were shot.
At 1:15 p.m. on November 22nd, just 45 minutes after JFK was shot, Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit was murdered in Oak Cliff. The official story: Lee Harvey Oswald gunned him down while fleeing the assassination scene. But the details have never lined up.
It's not easy for R.C. Nelson to go back to that day nearly 50 years ago.
For 20 years, I wouldn't even talk about it.
What gets to you?
Pretty much just that day.
Nelson was a 26-year-old Dallas police officer and patrol partner of J.D. Tippit, who was shot and killed by Lee Harvey Oswald.
We have information that a suspect just went in the Texas theater on...
Nelson helped arrest Oswald, and the now 76-year-old retiree believes he targeted Tippit intentionally because he wanted to be caught.
Oswald had not had his glory.
Nelson found no glory in his next assignment, protecting the man who killed his friend during an escort from the Dallas City jail.
Pretty mad. Mad indeed.
He's been shot. He's been shot. When Jack Ruby shot Oswald, Nelson put handcuffs on the well-known nightclub owner.
And he turned over and said, "Hey guys, it's Jack, it's me."
Why are you telling your story for the first time?
Several authors contacted me for a story and I blew them off.
He retired from the department years later, wishing his patrol partner could have done the same.
According to the autopsy reports, Tippit was shot 4 times, 3 times in the chest and once in the head, behind the right ear. Witnesses described 2 men, not 1. Multiple bystanders told police they saw a larger man working in Tatum with another shooter. A coordinated hit, clean, military style, and not the frantic act of a lone gunman. In recent decades, some researchers have speculated that the larger man may have been G. Gordon Liddy, the same man who would later orchestrate the Watergate burglary. Liddy, they argue, was with the CIA at the time and connected to black ops. Though no official evidence confirms this, the rumor persisted. So where does James Files fit into all of this? Files believes the Tippit murder was part of a larger deception, a critical plot in setting up Oswald as the patsy.
When you met Oswald, the day that you went down there to kind of do some pre-planning, you said you didn't talk about the assassination.
We didn't talk about the assassination, no. And I knew Oswald 6 months before that because I'd been running guns down there to Louisiana, to Baton Rouge, and giving them to Lee Harvey Oswald, and he was taking them over to New Orleans, getting them on a ship. We were sending weapons to Papa Doc at that time in Haiti. And after he died, we continued to ship weapons to Baby Doc.
Wow. Now, after the shooting, how did you get out of there, and how was it that, I mean, obviously, they arrested Oswald right away. Do you know why they chose him as the patsy and not any one of the other guys?
I don't know why they chose Oswald as a patsy. I never considered him as a patsy, and I didn't know it was going to fall down that way. But I was also supposed to meet with Oswald at the Texas Theater because David Allen Phillips, the night before that, he met with me first. I left, he met with Lee Harvey Oswald second. And if we had trouble, we were supposed to go to the Texas Theater and they'd fly us out of there into Mexico or somewhere out of the country. And I never let anybody plan my escape route. I always used my own judgment on that.
Yeah.
And I worked for the CIA for 28 years then as an asset. And I'm one of those people that don't exist.
In fact, some assassination researchers go even further, that Tippit's body may have been used as a double for Kennedy's autopsy photos. The theory suggests that Tippett's corpse, similar build, brown hair, and identical entrance wound in the skull, was used in fake autopsy photos to cover up the true nature of Kennedy's injuries. In fact, it's rumored that Tippett's nickname in the police force was JFK because he admired the president and looked very much like him. Whoever killed Officer Tippett wasn't trying to flee. They were trying to tie a bow on the cover story. With Oswald arrested for murder, the next day's headlines would deliver a simple narrative to the world. Oswald killed a cop, he killed the president, case closed. But for those paying attention, the truth had just begun to slip through the cracks.
Oswald did not kill Tippett.
No.
He didn't kill Tippett. He didn't kill JFK.
And Tippett was killed because why? Because
him and Gary Marlowe, the Raven.
Yeah.
They were good friends. They met down there doing the Bay of Pigs thing.
Right.
He
was part of that
the fishing camp that Gary had.
Right. Fishing camp. So anyway, they became beer buddies, you might say. They'd go out and they'd have a few beers together.
So they knew each other. When they'd see each other, they would know each other.
Tippett got out of the car. That's why I never pulled his gun. He was seeing a friend. If I was to get out of the car, I wouldn't pull a gun when I'm coming up to you.
For sure.
I'd be looking to shake your hand or hug your neck, one or the other.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the Raven, since nobody's supposed to know he was in Texas and Dallas that day, he pulls a 6-gun out and bam, 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 bam.
And that was all part because they were at that point pursuing Oswald because Oswald was told to go to the Texas theater.
Yeah, he got set up. Oswald was set up.
That was the rendezvous point.
He was told to go there too, but he wouldn't show up there.
I
was told to go there the night before in case we had a problem.
Right.
They had flashed out of the country.
And so Oswald was there to get picked up. And then when he got picked up by the police, Oswald thought he was going to get off.
Yeah.
There was a phone call made. And then Ruby wanted it. You can see where it was just all collapsing.
Yeah.
Why was Ruby willing? Did Ruby think he was going to?
Ruby had cancer.
They gave him cancer in jail.
They might have had cancer before they gave it to him. But they gave him shots while he was in jail to make sure he died.
He was going to talk to that.
The last person to see Jack Ruby in prison, and which was on TV not long ago, just a few months ago, was, anyway, they said Joe West was the last one to see, what's his name, Oswald, in his cell. And
Joe West was the one, the gentleman that was trying to lie to you?
They said on the TV, and it blew in my mind, they said Joe West was an asset for the CIA.
Wow.
The theory? Tippett had past connections to covert intelligence operations in Florida when Marlowe, a known spook asset, crossed his path. It wasn't a chance encounter, it was a cleanup. But there's even more. What if Gary Marlowe didn't act alone? Files hints 2 men may have got the drop on Tippett, a coordinated ambush to take out a liability and frame Oswald. And the shot to the back of the head? Eerily similar to the fatal wound JFK received, and exactly the kind needed to create fake autopsy photos, using Tippett's corpse as a stand-in. A theory long whispered, rarely proven, yet never debunked. Eyewitnesses reported 2 men fleeing the scene, not one. One was slender, the other stocky and broad-shouldered. Descriptions that match Marlowe and possibly someone else. Roscoe White, Mac Wallace, or even someone like Charles Harrelson, Woody Harrelson's dad. Charles Harrelson's wife was even Diane Lou Oswald, intersecting with the Oswald family of New Orleans. A possible connection? We don't know.
I was 25 the day Kennedy was assassinated, and I would say that gentleman is probably in his mid to late 30s at the very least. But the facial structures isn't even close.
Mr. Harrelson's photograph was given along with the tall tramp photographs to forensic anthropologists, 2 independent bodies or people, and they came back with a report that there was a 90 to 95% probability that the photograph of the tall tramp arrested in connection with the president's killing and Charles V. Harrelson arrested for the death of a federal judge were one and the same.
So ask yourself, was Gary Marlowe the trigger man, or just part of a 2-man team working in the shadows, executing orders passed down from the top?
Charles Harrelson's function was to deliver the Secret Service badges to a group of people on the hill. What he says and what a lot of people say who were there that day, is that they did not know it was going to be assassination. That they knew there was going to be an incident, but they never imagined it would be a murder. And a lot of those people then realized that they were part of this, conspiracy in the death of the president. And they kind of scattered. A lot of them were subsequently murdered themselves, including the key members, Johnny Roselli, who the day that he was the liaison between the CIA and the mafia, the three mafia chiefs. The day that he was subpoenaed by the House Assassination Committee, he disappeared. Was found a week later, chopped into small pieces in a oil drum in Biscayne Bay in Miami. And Sam Giancana, when he was subpoenaed to testify by the mob boss, the Chicago outfit boss, he was subpoenaed to testify for that committee, and he was murdered in his basement by an assassin. So there's over 30 people who were killed, who were witnesses or potential witnesses. And then a lot of people have confessed.
Part 3, the last piece. What if we could finally solve it? After decades of classified files, deathbed confessions, and government stonewalling, after 62 years, 2025 finally broke the silence. President Donald J. Trump ordered the full release of the JFK assassination files. RFK Jr. supported it, and Oliver Stone testified. And in the files were names, timelines, actions, and betrayals. This is the timeline of key events and suspected participants, based on FBI files, CIA documents, and verified statements. Spring 1963. David Atlee Phillips, CIA propaganda chief, begins handling Lee Harvey Oswald via covert contacts in New Orleans. James Files, Chicago mob asset and CIA contract killer, begins prepping weapons with Charles Nicoletti. Johnny Roselli, mafia liaison to the CIA and anti-Castro ops, is informed of a parallel domestic hit. Mac Wallace, LBJ's longtime enforcer, is seen traveling between Texas and Washington, D.C. Ed Lansdale, former Air Force general and CIA coordinator, reemerges in internal memos as a ground operations planner. October 1963. Oswald travels to Mexico City. CIA surveillance teams, headed by Phillips, document his visits to the Cuban and Soviet embassies. Multiple declassified memos reveal Oswald was impersonated at least once. George H.W. Bush is briefed on an anti-Castro operation involving Operation 40 in Florida. James Files is dispatched to scout Dealey Plaza escape routes. November 15th to the 21st. Nicoletti, Files, and Roselli converge in Dallas. Jack Ruby, longtime mob associate and police informant, meets with Roselli at the Old South Pancake House. Ruby hands Roselli an envelope containing colored Secret Service badges and a route change map. Ed Lansdale is seen in Dallas by multiple witnesses, later identified in Dealey Plaza photos. Mac Wallace is allegedly positioned on a higher floor above or near the book depository, possibly in the Dow Tax Building. CIA files confirm Mac Wallace held Pentagon clearance and had access to classified locations. November 22nd, 12:30. Kennedy's motorcade turns onto Elm Street. Charles Nicoletti fires from the Dow Tax Building. James Files, behind the grassy knoll fence, fires the fatal shot with a Remington Fireball pistol. Mac Wallace may have fired from a third position as insurance, according to Files. And Roscoe White, Dallas cop with CIA ties, is suspected of positioning or assisting in the Knoll area. Witnesses report smoke and flashes from multiple angles. 12:35 p.m. Kennedy is pronounced fatally wounded en route to Parkland. A coordinated cover-up begins. J. Edgar Hoover directs the FBI narrative towards Oswald acting alone. Files claims Hoover knew, but protected intelligence channels. 1:15 p.m. Officer J.D. Tippit is shot dead. The suspected shooters, Gary Marlowe, Files' associate and dispatched by Phillips, or possibly Roscoe White or another coordinated agent. 2 p.m. Lee Harvey Oswald is arrested. Paraffin tests show no gunpowder residue on his cheek, suggesting he did not fire a rifle. November 24th, 1963. Oswald is shot by Jack Ruby, who is quickly arrested but never meaningfully interrogated. Ruby later says, "They didn't want Oswald to talk." Files, Phillips, Nicoletti, Ruby, Roselli, Bush, Wallace, Hoover, and Lansdale. A cable of power. Some CIA, some mob, and some political. And in the middle, one man who said he was a backup shooter, and who's still alive today, James E. Files.
The Zapruder film doesn't capture the grassy knoll shooter, does it?
No.
Yeah. And there's no video footage of you that day. Is there still a video?
As far as I know, there is. And
there is?
What people have claimed and said and told and talked about. Me, I always said, don't know, but the FBI knew about me. I thought, knew about me from a few days afterwards, but they knew about me from day one. I've come to find out.
That one Cuban snitch guy was Aldo Vera, and he told the FBI that you were there. That's all they've known since 1963, 64.
He was one of the Cubans I worked with in Cuba.
It's good.
Why would they tell the public the truth now? Why would they tell the public? I have lied to you for the last 60 years because you're stupid. So after 61 years, I'm going to tell you the truth now. No, they're not going to do that.
These aren't loose ends. They're a design. This film is based on primary source documents, declassified files, and first-person testimony. The question is no longer if it was a conspiracy. The question is, how long did they think we wouldn't find out? I think we just solved Kennedy.
I am today announcing my candidacy for the presidency of the United States. The presidency is the most powerful office in the free world. Through its leadership can come a more vital life for all of our people. In it are centered the hopes of the globe around us for freedom and a more secure life. I am announcing today my candidacy for the presidency of the United States. I do not run for the presidency merely to oppose any man. I run because I am convinced that this country is on a perilous course. No one who knows what I know about the extraordinary demands of the presidency can be certain that any mortal can adequately fill that position.
Another one who's another great mind and a great guy and so popular, and I think he's right. He wants to make people healthy. It's driven him pretty wild over the last number of years. And the Democrats didn't treat him well. He was doing fantastically well. Today I nominated him for, I guess, if you like health and if you like people that live a long time, it's the most important position. RFK Jr. Bobby?
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
I will establish a new independent presidential commission on assassination attempts. And they will be tasked with releasing all of the remaining documents pertaining to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy.
Among free men, said Abraham Lincoln, there can be no successful appeal from the ballot to the bullet. Violence breeds violence. Repression breeds retaliation. And only a cleansing of our whole society can remove this sickness from our souls.
I want to also congratulate somebody's going to make us all healthy. RFK Jr., we love you. I don't see if he's campaigning all over the place. He's campaigning. You're all over. Hello, you both. Nice to see you both. He's doing a good job. He's a great guy, too. He really is. He's going to make us a healthier place. We're going to let him go wild for a little while. Then I'm going to have to maybe rein him back. Because he's got some pretty wild ideas, but most of them are really good, I think. He's a good man, and he believes the environment, the healthy people. He wants healthy people. He wants healthy food. And he's going to do it. He's going to have a big chance to do it because we do need that.
And more, much more than this, I did it my way. Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. I did what I had to do, saw it through without exemption. I planned each charted course, each careful step along the byway. Much more than this, I did it my way. Yes, there were times, I'm sure you knew, when I bit off more than I could chew. But through it all, when there was doubt, I ate it up and spit it out. I faced it all, and I stood tall, and did it my way. I've laughed and cried, I've had my fill, my share of losing, and now, as tears subside, I find it all so amusing to think I did all that, and may I say, not in a shy way. Oh no, not me. I did it my way. For what is a man? What has he got? If not himself, then he has not to say the things he truly feels, and not the words of one who kneels. The record shows I took the blows and did it my Yes, it was my